Alors, bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this Standing Committee on Strategies and Public Policies of Dieppe City Council. There are different elements, different aspects will be presented. It's basically public presentations tonight. No decisions tonight. No resolutions to adopt items. It's just a information session. So without further ado, I'm going to invite our first presenter, Mr. Craig Wright, to come to the podium to present the results of a community survey that took place this year.
A lot of people have been waiting for Mr. Wright.
And I'm here.
There you are.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So
Please make sure that you speak into the microphone so that our translation people can do the translation and so on.
Okay. You can hear me?
Yep.
Very good.
Oh, we can hear you, but we're good? Yeah, okay.
Perfect. Very good. So I'm in a little bit of an odd situation tonight where I have I'm English, obviously, speaking English as you can hear, and I have French slides. So I'll ask for your patience and please no difficult questions.
You're asking a lot.
That's right. Exactly. Very good. So I am here to present the results of your third citizen survey, and I have you'll see very good news to share. They're very positive results. A little bit on the methodology to begin. This was a telephone survey. It was conducted late last year, November and December. The sample size was just over 400. It was 400 completes. And they were all conducted with citizens of Dieppe. And they had the choice whether to answer in French or English, their choice. And the survey itself lasted about 20 minutes on average, which is longish, but I think people were engaged and interested and participated. A couple of just very statistical things. When you see results presented, they'll often quote what they call what we call a margin of error, and that is, in this case, plus or minus 4.9%, plus or minus 5%, 19 times out of 20. So essentially what that means is any number could be 5% higher or lower than the number that we're showing there. So let me start to show you the results here. First ones are quality of life, a general question on quality of life. And you'll see through these results a sense of pride, thank you, a sense of belonging in the community, and generally positive results here. The survey was completed before in 2011, 2014, and now in 2017. The results are better, higher than 2014, and more in line with 2011. So this question asked respondents to rate the quality of life in Dieppe on a 10-point scale, 1 to 10, and we typically treat ratings of 8, 9, and 10 as very high, very good ratings. 5, 6, and 7 as more fair ratings, and 1 to 4 as low ratings. And so what you'll see here is the current year, 2017, is the bottom year each time, and I understand I can mark here. So this year, and this year will be the current years. And you see very positive results here, over 80% giving a rating of 8 or higher. And then most of the people who didn't give an 8 or higher are giving 5, 6, and 7. Very, very small proportion, 1, 2%, who are giving numbers under 5. So quite positive overall. This slide, the scale changes here. We've given respondents a series of questions, or series of statements, and we ask them to give their level of agreement with those statements. So their choices are to completely agree, mostly agree, mostly disagree, or completely disagree. And what we're showing here is only the completely agree people. If I showed you the completely agree and the mostly agree, almost all of them would be 90% or higher. So the agreement levels are very high. With the exception of the very last one, which is financially stable. That one's a little lower. That one's always a little lower whenever we ask about taxes, or are you getting fair value for your money and whatnot. People have a tendency to be a little more conservative. So here, just to quickly go down through them, the first one, a healthy community, respecting the environment, rich artistic and cultural community, strong sense of belonging in my community, and financially stable. So all of them, as I say, except the last one, are all very positive. The financially stable, if we added the mostly agree to the completely agree, it's about it's just over 70% who are agreeing. So very, very what I would call solid results here. These are even more positive. These are, again, a series of statements, and the level of agreement being shown here is the completely agree as well. And as you can see, it's about 60% or higher on every one of them. Excellent community to raise a family. I would strongly recommend it. A bright future, I feel safe, and plenty of recreational opportunities. So all very, very, very positive again. This one is economic development in Dieppe, and they're asked to compare it to the last 3 years. So is it better, about the same, or worse? And of course, you would want those worst numbers to be as small as they could possibly be, and they are very small. 2% saying it's worse, almost 3/4, 74%, saying that it's better, and about the same, 20%. So again, most people, a very strong majority, feeling that it's better. This next section is on satisfaction with municipal services and a sense of value for money. And again, as I said a few minutes ago, people tend to be a little more conservative in their estimates of value for money. But the kind of the value for money question. Not so many excellent as you'd expect. Just again, people are a little more cautious, but almost all good. So we have 70% saying it's excellent or good. quite positive. There is what I would consider certainly a minority, but a significant enough minority to warrant some attention. So on the not so good, 19% and 7%. So about a quarter who are in that not feeling so positive about the result. I wouldn't consider it bad. I would just consider it worthy of monitoring it. Satisfaction with the municipal services is again very strong. You'll see we have the 8, 9, and 10 numbers separated, and 54% are falling there. Very consistent with previous waves of research. And again, very small number falling into the 1 to 4, and most of the other people falling into the 5 to 7. So again, positive results. It's not unusual for us to get as many as 10%, 10, 12% when we ask these types of questions. So you being only at 5% is very good. Traffic and roads. So here we've again asked on the 1 to 10 scale. The 8, 9, and 10 is in the dark blue, 2014 and 2017. You see quite an improvement there. It goes from 53% giving a 8, 9, or 10, all the way up to 63% giving an 8, 9, or 10. The averages are off on the right here, and the average has gone from 7.2 to 7.8. Again, quite positive. This is the priorities. And again, a long kind of list of questions that ask for people's agreement. And in this case, we are showing the completely agree, mostly agree, kind of all along, completely agree here, mostly here, and then working across. And you can see on this side the level of agreement, so completely and mostly added together, and they're very high for the most part. I change my habits to help the environment, talking about the quality of the buildings and architecture. Again, very high agreement. I'd visit the market if it was open during the week. High agreement. The sense that the prosperity of the community is linked to population, the hours of the library meeting the needs of the residents, still quite high levels of agreement. And where there aren't high levels of agreement on that one, people are saying they don't know, so I presume they're non-users in that case. Where dropped the only one that I would say falls into the negative here, or is the very bottom one, the bus system meeting the needs of the residents. And in this case, you've got 40% agreeing, a fairly high level not knowing, 23%. That would be the only one on that list that I would think is really not positive, like the rest are. And then we asked an open-ended question towards the end of the survey, and we just asked what were the priorities, what needs attention from council. And what you see here, the dark blue is the current year, and there's 2 or 3 around 10%, but nothing that stands out with a high percentage. If you compare to the light blue, which was the 2014, you could see that roads and traffic were much more noted in that case, and that those have now dropped back into a range where the others are. And I think that's about it. So thank you. I think in general very positive results that you should be proud of.
OK, alors, question de la part des membres.
So questions from members of council. Councillor Godet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sometimes these things get taken out of context. And in the presentation of your report, I noticed on page 8 and 9, there are two tables that just show between 2017, 2011, etc. And if that was taken out of context, people would think that, for instance, on page 8, that only 24% of the population think that the financial situation of the municipality is in good shape, because it doesn't enumerate what is the categories. So I just caution you about making tables like that, because it's subject to an interpretation which is different than what reality is, in a sense that if you take that out of context, you have no idea why the support is so low in the population.
Okay, I'm
You
sorry.
understand what I mean?
Which table
On page 8,
of the report, you mean, or the presentation?
Of the presentation.
Presentation, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
the presentation.
I brought
I'm sorry.
both with
I'm
me.
sorry.
No, my problem.
C'est l'opinion par rapport aux facteurs d'appartenance.
It's the opinion concerning the factors of sense of belonging.
This one?
Go back up.
One more?
It's about the third or fourth.
Oh, okay.
Go down.
Oh, I know
Go
it,
down
yeah.
one.
I know exactly
Down.
what you mean, yeah.
There.
Yes.
Those there.
Oh, okay, yes.
I don't like those graphs, because
Okay.
when I first read it, I said, my God, I can't believe that only 39% or 50% of the population want to be respective of the
Yes.
environment.
Yeah.
I think that you should show the other.
Show all the other categories. Point taken. I think we did in most cases.
Yes.
And I agree with you. It's much more complete and
It skews the picture.
yeah, okay. We could certainly easily make a change to that and
I would
update it.
appreciate
Well, I
it.
think
Yeah,
it would create a better
no problem.
visual for all.
Absolutely, we can change both the report and the presentation. Easily done.
Anything else, Councillor Gaudin?
Yes, I have one question.
Okay.
How did you pick the 400 and some people?
They're always picked at random, so we will have telephone numbers, and I usually add cell phone numbers into that as well. Particularly over the last 5 to 10 years, and I'm sure you'd all appreciate what I'm going to say. If we don't have a cell sample in the phone numbers, it's very difficult, particularly to reach younger people. And so then it's a random call. But we will make one of the things I didn't point out on the very beginning here. This response rate, 14.5%. So we will talk to, well, we will attempt to talk to a lot more than 400 to get 400. Refusals aren't usually that high, but you can't reach people, or you get answering machines. You get, all of these things happen, and so it's intended to be a random process, and it ends up being a random process, and that's actually why we do it by telephone. When you want a true random sample, a telephone sample is your best.
I guess my last comment is related to the architectural concerns of the community. I found that very high, because it's almost in a second category or third category concern. But then when you read into the report, most of the comments come from those who are living in apartment buildings and what would you call it, residential services. Any explanation on that, or is it an oddity, or is that normal?
I'm not sure that I do have an explanation for it. I think as I looked at it, I thought, well, that really they're saying, you need to maintain a quality as you're building, but that's all I sort of.
Because if you look at most of the buildings in Dieppe compared to other municipalities, I wouldn't say that they're magnificent structures, but at least they're structures that look aesthetically and architecturally
Newer and look good, yes, I'd agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur le Conseiller Alain.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Maire. Greg,
Councillor Alain.
Oh, thank you.
in my former life with numbers like that, we'd get elected a lot
That's
more,
right,
a lot
that's
more.
right.
So that's good. So Greg, we've had the discussion many times. So on the quality of life question, I'm about comparison, and you alluded to when you're comparing to other cities. Is there hard data that you could provide us to really, for us to, I think the best way to better ourselves is to have some type of data from other cities or some other entities like us that we can compare ourselves and see how it goes.
I do not have absolute comparisons. I can give you a little bit of a rule of thumb that we use. If we have 70% or more giving a rating of 8+, we consider that to be a very good rating. It's not at all unusual to have 10%, 12% who give quite low ratings, almost on any question that we care to ask. And so if you're into 80%, I think that's quite exemplary. I'd love to be able to say, here's 5 other cities and here's what the numbers are, but I don't have those numbers.
And on a little bit to the line of question is Councillor Gaudette was going. So these sentences or the statements were provided by obviously staff here.
Yeah, we would have typically the topics are designed. And we'll develop the questions. In this case, though, and in any case where you're doing what we call a tracking study, so you do 2011, you do 2014, 2017, you really try not to change the questions. And the simple reason is, as soon as you change the question, it's difficult to compare to what you had before. Even, sometimes you'll tweak the words a little bit, and you're okay. But technically, as soon as you change a word, you really can't compare to. You might have inadvertently changed the meaning of the sentence. So we really try not to change tracking studies unless there's a great need to change them.
Perfect. Well, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Maire.
Merci. Pas d'autres questions?
Thank you. No other questions? No?
The presentation, you got off the hook pretty easy.
I did, thank you.
We were a little tender today, so a little soft today. So.
You were kind to me, thank you.
There you go. Thanks again for your presentation. OK, la deuxième présentation.
The second presentation.
Mais ça nous fera plaisir de vous avoir au micro, Mme Chamberlain. Ouais, une version améliorée de Kirk.
So an improved version on Kirk. As you've said, Monsieur Lapierre, Kirk is not here. So I'm Marie Chamberlain. Those who know me see me with another hat with Centraide, the United, and I've helped them with their campaign. I want to mention it when Centraide came to knock to my door. They explained what was happening. I come from a small region where Centraide is not present. And why did I choose to go at Centraide? It's simply because I would have benefited from an organization like the one in United Way when you're in a family with needs. So this cause touches me profoundly, and it's important to continue to be a cause that we support in our community. So tonight, as a first, I want to thank Dieppe and its staff. There was a strong participation with the staff in the city of Dieppe. They supported a great campaign, about $13,000 raised. So I want to say, first of all, thank you for the support. So the objective, it's last kick at the bucket, if you will. Our objective was 2.5 million. It's a very audacious target, you'll say. But as with the app, we're also audacious and we see far and wide. And with this campaign, we're lacking 90,000, but now we're down to $80,000 at 1 week from the end of the campaign. So if you know United Way, Centraide, it involves different organizations here in the region. We fund 27 agencies. Here they probably cover the wider area, the youths and boys and girls clubs, to name just a few. In this campaign, we always still looking for that 80 grand, so that we don't have to say no to the organizations that have great needs. You know that the population is growing in our area, so therefore the needs as well. So how can we help Centraide? Well, it's with money. Basically, that's how we can help those organizations that take advantage of it. So either to direct donations by sharing information, your networks and the dynamic businesses in Dieppe, sharing information. Sometimes we can make some gains, which are very interested in mobilizing your employees for perhaps a last-minute activity to help us reach our target and to help those people that really need it. So this picture makes me a bit funny. It feels like the Olympic when you're the last go. So I know what it's like to have such a need. I don't have that need today, but that need still exists. So you have a special place for your community, and it's important. And again, many thanks to Dieppe, your staff, your employees, your energy, your constant support. And if I want to, and I repeat this, if you can send information to share in your networks so that we can reach that objective, that target, that would be greatly appreciated. Any questions on the part of the council? So we'll ask to our communication teams to share the message on the city's site. And I know that several members of the council are very active. So we'll definitely try to spread the message for this last week. Thank you. So with this short presentation, we're getting caught up. This is the inclusion program, social inclusion. So with Karen Pelletier and Madame Saunier. Kimi Saunier. So good evening, everybody. I'm Karen Pelletier. I am a social worker, community worker, and facilitator with the New-Brunswick Association for Community Integration. Good evening. I'm Academy Saunier, a student at university in social work, and I'm doing my internship with Karine. So today we'll talk about what we do as an association, and we'll also talk about and come back on this social inclusion aspect. So this was created in '57 by a group of parents. It exists to improve the quality of life of children and adults that have an intellectual deficiency and also their families. We foster the setting up of inclusive communities where everybody has a sense of belonging, to be valued and can take part in all aspects of community life. So social inclusion aims to foster a sense of belonging in your own community and through occasions or opportunities to live in the place of your choice, to have a relationship and take part in community life. So people are known as individuals with unique personalities, not as with labels as the handicapped person, the mental handicapped person, the client. So they're known through experiences that are shared with other people. They're recognized by their gifts, skills, interests. They're appreciated, and they have a choice. So social inclusion is important in some way. And the public always has this impression that people that have a handicap are people with special people that have different places to learn, live, work, and get involved. So people living in handicap are not always considered as ordinary citizens that want to take part in the daily life of their community. So when we're all included in our community, we live longer, we are less sick, less often, and when we are sick, we recuperate faster. So when isolated people have the possibility to meet other people in the community, everybody takes advantage of it. So we become more stable, that things are more sure, solid, more dynamic. So I'll talk about what we do in our program. So it's an AMBIC program that supports adults with supports mental deficiency. Intellectual deficiency helps the people to integrate in their communities so they can have a house of their choice, to develop a solid support network, to take part in community activities, recreational, volunteer, and our program supports people from 17 to 64 years old. It's available throughout the province in 5 following regions. So mainly Fredericton, Moncton, Grand Falls, Edmundston, St. John, and Bathurst. So help with life support, it means that really people have a choice. They have the choice to have a house that's sure and secure, personalized support, and numerous opportunities to develop relationships and also to participate in the community. So we, as facilitators, we have several roles, mainly to identify where and with whom they want to live and with the necessary support. As we're really focused on the person, it can change from one person to the next. We recruit suppliers for private support, identify collaborators, neighbors, make sure that the workers, this may include living in roommates, neighbors, and so on. So people have intellectual difficulties, are more vulnerable, so the support will bring more security, individual security with those people. So we want to set up a good support with the well-being of the person, her right to life, privacy, self-determination, and dignity. So I mentioned that l'aide à la vie, the help support of life, they do support in health and personal safety. We visit them once a month, so depending on their needs. As I've said, it can change from one person to the next, depending on the needs of the person. So we can support that person in terms of health and safety, to have a safe house, to have adequate support, good health, good maybe medications, good hygiene, nutritional meals every day. So it's by doing this that people will support, and it's through this that we take those measures to have a good life at home. So the support of quality of life in support measures, so the right of the person respected, there's a positive relationship and mutual between the persons and the support workers, so they get help to meet their objectives. Those are reviewed regularly and renewed as needed. Adequate support is supplied in situations where there's a crisis or emergency. We also make sure that the person is not isolated, so that there's a crisis line. So if there's a loss of support, of housing, person sent to hospital, there's always a line that the person can call, can call for immediate support. So we want to make sure that there's support, management, and person has a budget, they pay their bills on time, managing and using public funding, and so on. So a facilitator acts as a bridge with the community life for people involved in the program. However, they're not a support worker per se that supplies personal assistance on the daily basis. So they can be involved depending on the specific needs of the person. So the progress in the life of several handicapped people have been formidable. However, it is recognized that even with all of this, people that don't have a handicap have a greater advantage to go forward, to be a full-time citizen, contributing and participating. So there's more of a chance to reach their objective compared to a person with handicap. So the thought here I want to bring here this evening is that even though with years of efforts and progress that the association has been able to accomplish over the last few years, people with intellectual deficiency are often refused opportunities to work, to do volunteer work, to take part in activities, recreational activities, and to live in their own house. So we can still see some of those difficulties. We still see them in 2018. There are various ways for social inclusion. So participation of any person in the community is based in great part on the interests and personal preferences, skills, capacities, and opportunities that are created or offered. So this is not different for people that have intellectual deficiency. It's for everybody. We aim for social inclusion. It's for everybody. So we want to make sure everybody in Dieppe are socially included in the community. So that's my presentation. Thank you for listening to us. What are your expectations from us? As an organization, we would really like for community in Dieppe be a bit more inclusive, that it would be more easy for people to have opportunities to volunteer, to have housing. So to be more inclusive at that level. We're already inclusive, but we're not at the level that we would like to see at this point. Any questions on the part of the council? Mrs. Arsenault. Congratulations. This is good work. I'm surprised that you say that you have difficulty to get people to take some of those people to act as volunteers. Also difficulty to have people that, to want to hire them as employees, to give them a job, as we say. This was tried here in Dieppe. Usually we try to look for volunteering opportunities. So whether it's in Dieppe proper or in the greater Moncton area, often there might be closure, so people are not going to answer emails or calls. Sometimes the doors are closed because of this, so many people that want to volunteer have intellectual deficiency. Sometimes we find the doors being closed when we try to connect with people in the community. So something else, you should have a network that was fairly wide open, very well connected, to be able to monitor in terms of crisis, to dangerous situations, to help in the kitchen. You help them in the kitchen, in their needs, all the aspects. So you probably have quite a bit of network to help those people. Yes, we have a fairly wide network in terms of what, if is the crisis throughout the province. We have already plans on what to do if there was some sort of emergency, in case of the loss of support, housing. When we get to people that are in their own houses, and we want to make sure that we go and see them at least once a month, depending on the person, and to see what the requests would be. And then if a person needs help, to assist them, maybe cooking courses and so on, that's where the support people show up. We are not support people per se, but we are there to make sure that everything's functioning well. So in terms of volunteering, when somebody starts to volunteer, I can go a few times to see if everything's working fine, and then afterwards, if the person can function by themselves. And sometimes people have support workers that accompany them during their volunteering work, or to help them to take up, to do some tasks at home, cleaning, washing. So we are there to help people to really find an apartment, and then we go and see them once a month to make sure that everything's working fine at home. So I don't want to monopolize the mic, but the last question. Are there some that are working, living alone, or two or three or four together? Usually, all the people with support live alone in their apartment. A few are fairly autonomous, self-sufficient. As far as I can see, people in the Greater Moncton area, the people all live alone. Many have support. It might depend on, it's always changes. It's different from one person to the next as to how much support. Some it's 24 hours a day, sometimes it's a few hours a week. Some don't need support, so they're by themselves in their apartment. Thank you. Cormier, Councillor Cormier, do you have a list of approaches or a sheet of some sort that would help the municipality to be made more aware, to raise people's awareness, to open their doors, more positions? Do you have a list of approaches that is already set? For the time being, I don't think we have one. But that's something that we might be able to help the community to become more inclusive to intellectual deficiency. That's something that we could work on and send to you. So yes, that would be a good idea to have a sheet, as a guide as to how to proceed to be more inclusive. Mr. Godet, my question pertains to the way that the community would communicate with you. If they express an interest right now, you have a phone number, is in Fredericton. Can the people reach you locally if they want to become a volunteer with your organization? And secondly, this contact system, could we go through Dieppe? You know, some of the communication methods we have in Dieppe to make your organization better known. It would be important to have somebody locally that we can contact to contact. Well, we have an internet site. All our contacts are on the internet site. And that's done by region in the province. So if you go by region in Moncton, you would find all the people that work at the association in the Moncton area, and that covers the greater Moncton area. So we're all on the internet site. That would be the way to reach us. Thank you. Mr. Alain. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, thank both of you and Mrs. Legere behind you. So, thank you for your help in inclusion and especially the Department of Education. So, for the Greater Moncton, what are the numbers? How many people are we working with over a year? And the budget is coming from where for your organization? Many people might not know. So you do such great work. I just want to know more. I think, as Councillor Cormier said, you know, it'd be nice if we had this on a sheet with key messages, talking points to talk to the population. Well, in terms of how we're funded, we are funded with partly by clothing collection. If you see the big orange bins in Moncton or Dieppe or Riverview, we have our orange bins where we gather clothing. And that's part of the funding process. Also, we're in partnership with social development. And so our funds also come from them. That's pretty well it in terms of funding as an organization. And how many individual, how many people? It depends on how you look at this. People that we support in apartments throughout the province are about 70 of them. That doesn't seem like much, but it is quite a bit. In terms of community communications connection, in terms of volunteer work, it's about 200. So sometimes, for instance, over the last week, we had 10 references for community inclusion in the, so we are resource people, so people find us if they need, they'll find us on the internet site. They go and get our names, and then we continue from there. So thank you, good work. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Thibodeau. Thank you, Bishop. One question, you partly answered it. Do you usually use volunteers, or do you have specialized employees? You want to know, to help the people or to assess their conditions, or usually the way it works, the people that we support, if they need somebody to accompany them for volunteer activities, for instance, they could have the support worker. Usually it depends on the disability support program at social development, if they're approved some hours, so support workers will be them to accompany them. Also, we can recruit volunteers that will accompany them in their own volunteering work. It could be once a week, a few hours a week, so it depends on the person in question. As I said before, it's different from one person to the other. Usually it's support worker. Mr. Melançon, I want to specify that the town of Dieppe has an inclusion policy adopted a few years ago, and what I'll do, and I'll bring this up with the Recreation Department, that they network with you and that we work with our policy, your initiatives, and make sure that we work together. And if we can do good things, we'll definitely accompany each other. So we'll follow up with the city services. There's already actions done by our rec department, I believe. So the social program, inclusive programming. So we have elements that are in place that ensure inclusion. There is some programming, some costs, but as much as possible, our programming ensures inclusion of people. Short intervention. For the benefit of the members here, the province has set up, in terms of housing, some standards that are fairly recent, barrier-free, and new building. There's a ratio that have to be respected in terms of the number of housing fully accessible, that will help with social inclusion, that will help the handicapped people to avoid difficulties. So the planning department is already working on to have those standards to be respected and with the developers in the town. Thank you for this clarification. Thank you, ladies, for your presentation. If there's nothing else, we will thank you. And as you see, there are some doors are already open, and we'll keep them open. Thank you very much, and have a good evening. The next presentation, we will talk about social, cultural diversity and an action plan to do this. With Mr. Ben Champeau, if I understood correctly. So, good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I'm happy to be with you this evening to do an overview of the work we've done the last few months in terms of the action plan for cultural diversity, which goes through the migratory increase. I was interested in the presentation from the CRA at Craig, who gave data that helped to reinforce some of the message that we've received through the roundtable process, so that we were able to get the information that we're sharing this evening. So I'm really happy to give you some of the overview. So I'm start So my son formation origin on the ice. So you got Craig's team at Sierra. He suggested that we build a dome so he could skate throughout the year. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the importance of cultural diversity and what people bring, the new immigrants contribute in terms of contribution. So I'll show you how Dieppe is perceived and the high points. I'll go over that really quickly, but I want to take the time to show you, and you've seen this, you're living it, how much growth we have in terms of work, economic growth in the Dieppe, Greater Moncton, more than 50,000 plus new jobs over since 2001. So 62,000 in 2001, nearly 78,000 in 2016. Very good news. If we look at the numbers, perhaps a bit more of a concern is the aging of the workforce. If you look at that increase, we can see from 45 to 65 has doubled since 2001. You know, and these a lot of people, they're approaching retirement. It'll leave quite a gap, perhaps an alarmingly over the next few years. It's the same slides as before, but you can see the difference here, and you can see to what extent the growth. This reflects the aging of the working population. If you look at people that less than 25 years old, there's a lot less than before. The good news is that the population growth in Moncton and Dieppe continues. We have a great and incredible growth from the last census. And I have a slide here that I want to show with you here. It's not on your list. In 2001, when we did the census in Greater Moncton, there were 3,400 new immigrants, part of the total population of Greater Moncton. Right now, we would have 8,000 new immigrants, part of the Greater Moncton. So it takes a century to go from 0 to 3,400 and just about a decade to go to 8,000. And the most important growth is basically the last 5 years, between 2011 and 2016. We went from 5,000 to 8,000. So over those 5 years, it's practically as important as the first 100 years in the Greater Moncton area. So this goes to show that there's an exponential growth of new immigrants that reflects life, economic growth.
Sam. And at the same time, it shows the importance of what is being done in Dieppe to make sure that there's a good social integration and how we can take advantage as much as possible of the contribution to quality of life and the economic growth. And then to go on with this slide, I found it interesting, this last census statistics that shows very clearly that in the Moncton region, there are fewer than 20% who are refugees, and there's more than 80% who are people who are coming into the labor market as new arrivals in the community. Just a little wink at the community college partners here who give us a great cultural diversity in the Dieppe community. Just a couple of years ago, there were 10 or 12 international students. There are more than 100 now. And then once again, this is a growth of the international population at the New-Brunswick Community College reflects the trend that we've seen in Moncton, which is exponential. Mainly from Africa, Haiti. But it's interesting to see the cultural diversity on the community college campus that reflects this new cultural diversity that we see in Dieppe and in the greater Moncton area. It's important for us when we started this exercise to really look for the heartbeat of the community of new arrivals, those who live in Dieppe, those who don't live in Dieppe, the students, the families, the refugees. So we took the time to consult and to get the feedback of all the stakeholders, new arrivals in the community. To give you an idea of what the people are living through on a daily basis. And in a general sense, the reputation of Dieppe is a very good one. I'm not surprised to see the figures that Craig showed us today. First of all, in terms of the acceptance of Dieppe, you see it in the exponential growth of the population. I mean, the figures came out 86%, 68% concerning the importance that the citizens of Dieppe were showing. These figures were more visible in Craig's report than in ours, but it confirmed what we heard. Good quality of life, safe, feeling of safety. I found it interesting to talk on a nightly basis. I think I had approximately 15 roundtable discussions, and they talked about things that we take for granted: the quality of life, safety. People felt comfortable. They found the cleanliness, the peacefulness, things that we take for granted, but that for them is very important, and it helps to settle here. They identified it very clearly as a Francophone community. This came out very importantly. What we didn't expect was to see that it was something that was very attractive to Anglophones, new Anglophones. They said that it was important for them to learn French, and they were convinced that they were going to be learning it more quickly if they're in a Francophone community. I hadn't imagined to hear this in such a way, and it came out at most of the roundtables. Not to change anything, but to support what you're saying. In the population growth of Dieppe since the 80s, we've always maintained a proportion that's fairly equal of 25% of the Anglophone population. So we've had a lot of people coming in from the north and the northwest, Francophones coming from there. We've still maintained the same type of proportion. So even considering everything, it says a lot of what the Francophones or the Anglophones or the Francophiles or the Anglophones married to French spouses. It's what they say when they come here. It's true. I have the figures in my presentation, and it confirms exactly that. Thank you. That's a good point. I also want to highlight the fact that to what extent the immigrants really appreciated this initiative of the city of Dieppe, and that came out at all the roundtables. And the people that I've met, they wanted it said here that the people really appreciated that we take time to listen to them. And once again, that is our approach to make sure that what we set down on paper as an action plan is what they said. They appreciated this because the roundtables were usually organized at night, in the evening, and there were tens of dozens of people who were coming. They were really very willing to share with us, and we wanted them to be frank, and we wanted them to share with us everything that they've lived through, the positive aspects, the negative aspects, in order for us to be able to improve. So everybody was very receptive, and everybody said, whatever we can do, we would like to get involved in any way possible. If the mayor, the councillors want to set up advisory councils, communities, to get feedback or to make sure that the action plan is headed in the right direction, everybody was open for that. Everybody was willing to contribute, to give you the relevant information to make sure that we're going in the right direction. I won't go through everything that we met. I mean, there were approximately 15 round tables with different ethnic groups, new arrivals or important stakeholders like CAFI. We met the CAFI group, and CAFI, and I take this opportunity to thank them. They do fantastic work to help us organize this. About half a dozen of meetings with the new arrivals in here, and that helped us a lot in our work and in the results. So the CAFI, the community college, the Francophone South school district, a lot of people contributed to the success of the process. I mean, I could spend all evening here, but I want to go straight to the goal. We had a lot of meetings. We've got a lot of information. And when we put them all together, there are 4 grand themes. There's housing, jobs, public transit, and social integration. It's a strategic way of seeing this, and it comes from them. I was expecting to hear a lot about employment. I also expected to hear a lot about the welcome and the social integration. It's something that came up in all of our meetings, but, and it's an important but, when we took time to question more in detail, welcoming and social integration, the 2 important themes that came up and that struck me because I had underestimated them, it was housing and public transit. So in this context of social integration and the welcome, all the new arrivals said to us that the most important aspect was housing. When we come into the region, the key to everything else is housing. We have to find a place to live in, and that is going to basically dictate everything else. Access to really, I mean, if there's a community where there's no vacancy, we won't be able to live there because we can't. So housing is the initial important aspect, and everything from that trickles down. What we see as social integration, but the important aspect was housing, and I found that very interesting. Public transit. I had underestimated that aspect too. Once we're settled in good housing and we have our needs that are met, we're looking for a place where it can be 3 or 4 generations under one roof, and that is not part of the North American culture. In certain places of Africa or in Asia, that's the fact. So after we found that, then it's a question of getting around efficiently. And that helps social integration. And afterwards, once we have housing, we're well housed, and we can get around efficiently in the community, this is how we're going to be setting up networks, and that's how we'll be able to find employment. Employment came up in all discussions, but I found it interesting that before getting to the employment aspect, it was first of all housing, and then mobility, and then through that came social integrity, social integration. And after that, we found the employment. So that's why I set it up in that way. So With these teams, we established an action plan. I think you've received it. It's a detailed action plan for Dieppe. And this is going to be helping the integration services in Dieppe. Dieppe supports some projects regionally, and other things that came out in our process, but are not part necessarily of a plea. So actually, we could spend the whole evening going through the detailed plan, but the important aspects are these. Do I still have 2 or 3 minutes? Yeah, you have at least 5. If you need 15, we'll give you 15. Perfect. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't want to take too much of your time. Housing, it's important for the people who are going to be settling in Dieppe. Okay, yes, we love that, but we weren't able to find housing in the prices that we're looking for. So in many cases, nothing was available. Even if we didn't have the money, there was no housing. In some cases, there was some, but those who were available were too expensive. So we had to go elsewhere. And, okay, if we don't have a car, well, we tried to find a job in those areas. And that explains why they're somewhere else rather than here. In a general sense, Dieppe, which is logical because Dieppe is a fairly young municipality with new housing, rather, as opposed to the Greater Moncton. And rental, for example, is more expensive than elsewhere in the Greater Mountain because they're newer. But from the person that arrives here and looking for $500 a month housing, it's easier to find elsewhere in the Greater Moncton than in Dieppe. In some cases, people like the Syrians who are looking for social housing, well, once again, there was a better offer elsewhere, and that explains why there are fewer in Dieppe. It's not because of lack of interest, but once again, it's the importance of the housing aspect in the equation. With the students that we met, they said all that they can live in residences on campus at the University of Moncton, whereas at the community college, there are no residences. So a lot of them succeeded in finding apartments, affordable apartments on Gauvin Street, walking distance from the community college. Some, when I asked, all those to whom I asked, who said they were living in Moncton, and when I asked why, it was because they couldn't find anything in Dieppe. But ideally, they would have preferred finding something in Dieppe because it's closer to the community college, whereas now they're dependent on the bus schedules. Housing, they also mentioned that it was good to be well informed on what's available. In an ideal world, if there was a website, for example, that would give us all the available housing possible, a house or an apartment or a condo or semi-detached, if there was an inventory of what was available, it would help our integration in the community. Once again, public transport, get around efficiently, critical for their integration. When they explain it to us, it seems logical, but I had underestimated how important it was for an action plan. And every time I asked them where they lived and why, when it wasn't a question of housing accessibility, it was because there was a bus to go to the university campus or to the community college campus or to work. That came up often. People seem to say that it was easier, that there was more frequency, more network in Moncton than in Dieppe, which in many cases explained their decision to go to one municipality rather than the other one. The frequency of the buses to community college presented a challenge, and they found it very difficult. Social integration, welcome. Everyone we met mentioned it. What we've mentioned already also concerning this, Pli mentioned it, learning a new language, many things that we do in helping integration of new arrivals with the different stakeholders involved. A couple of ideas that they mentioned that I found interesting. Some of them who had been there for a while. If you remember Welcome Wagon, when we arrived in a community, we received a little basket. There were coupons, a lot of from different businesses in the area. That concept, they said, okay, if we settled in one ward and the councillor of the ward came to us to tell us about the businesses in the ward, it would be interesting. I found the concept interesting. A day of welcome at the municipal hall, a meeting with the mayor and councillors. They all mentioned the Mercredi show, the Wednesday shows. They found it a great place for social integration, and some suggested that, okay, without hijacking the program, could there be maybe 5 or 10% of the summer program that would be international groups that reflects the new emerging society? I found that interesting also. Lack of public space for social integration. In my meetings, I was mentioning the Dieppe market. Everybody agreed to say that they loved the market, that they went there Saturday morning, but all of them mentioned that this is not where integration happens. It's true, it's a great cultural diversity, but people go there, they do their shopping, and then they leave. It does not generate social integration. The market reflects the cultural diversity, but it's not where it happens. And I was surprised to hear that integration occurs at the Champlain Mall. It's easier for social integration, and I was surprised. They said, yes, yeah, we sit down, we talk, we take the time, I was mentioning, okay, and I said, okay, supposing the market were open more than Saturday morning, maybe, they said, but that's not where it happens, and I found that interesting. People support the the future multi-generational complex, hoping that it's going to take the place of the Champlain Mall for social integration. 1604 place, yes, a lot of people see a lot of potential. They understand the Dieppe vision concerning 1604 place, to turn it into the heart of the municipality, like in Europe. So like the ice skate rink As a matter of fact, people recognized it. They said, okay, there's a lot of work to do. For example, people who come from Africa, the question of population density, people who walk there, but they understand the vision and they agree with it and they approve the direction that Dieppe is taking with 1604 Place. And support to the community college. With regard to human resources, a lot of international students who are saying, okay, we're many, we generate a need, and they do the best that they can with the resources, but there's much to do yet. So these are a couple of things I wanted to share with you. And for the city of Dieppe and everything that's going on already with CAFI and Magma and all the other stakeholders is to continue to support them. There's a lot of work done. We were very clear at the beginning of the process that it was to complement what was being done already and to anchor everything that is being done solidly in the regional strategy for Dieppe. But just to say that we're going to be intervening much more directly with leadership. And without any surprise, employment. New arrivals don't expect to get a job the day after they arrive. They understand that in the smaller communities, it's a lot on who we know. It's a question of establishing themselves, settling in, and setting up a network. And at the same time, they said that we have to continue to work together so that employers can be open-minded and accept the differences, because okay, they feel comfortable that they're not going to get a job tomorrow morning, but if 2 years down the road we still haven't found a job, maybe we'll go to Montreal. They all said that. So, Mr. Mayor, councillors, in a word, that's a very, very quick overview of the process that we wanted to present to you tonight. All the entities in orange that we show, these are the stakeholders that are part of the regional strategy initiative. So just to say that there are a lot of players around Moncton that are involved in this integration of the new arrivals in the greater Moncton, of which Ville de Dieppe and Expansion Dieppe are a part of. Thank you, Mr. Champoux, for your presentation. Questions from members of Council. Conseiller Thibodeau. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's not a question, it's just a comment. I found your report very interesting, the research that you've done. I was surprised by a lot of things, but I believe that it is a nice tool for us to see what we can do to improve the situation of immigrants so that they become integrated and that they remain here. So thank you very much. Monsieur Godet. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nice work, Ben. You've covered everything pretty well. I have a question on the way of integrating immigrants. I didn't see it in their report, this possibility, but I had the opportunity to hear a presentation by a councillor in Bathurst last year. They've created a kind of welcoming program for families, for individuals, and for business people when an immigrant comes to the region to settle or to see what's going on in that community. There is someone who coordinates a network of volunteers, and they're going to be contacting the individual and say, listen, there's a gentleman who's coming from France or from Belgium or from Africa on such and such a day. Can you take that person in charge? And it doesn't necessarily involve everything, all the possibilities, but it's basically based on welcoming the person and with knowledge of the area, and it's the family too. And when it's a question of a family, that family will be maybe welcoming the new arrivals at home for a dinner or something like that. I didn't see anything of the kind in the report, so maybe it wasn't raised, but often I hear people who come from outside and they say here, okay, people are really welcoming, they're going to say hello, they're going to discuss and things, but very rarely do I ever get the opportunity to go into their homes, to meet their family, etc. So I thought, maybe is it something in Dieppe that we could do to create kind of a volunteer network at 3 levels to welcome these people, to make them interested in the community? It's an excellent point, and yes, it was mentioned. Certain aspects of that puzzle that are already in place. So we're going to do more. I do believe so, but I know that there are other ideas that are being worked on for the Greater Moncton area. People are starting to think about how to implement something like that. So we'll basically need a follow-up on these initiatives and to see if there's a way of working on this approach, because I'm convinced that you're right. BIMP, business mentorship, right? Puts a new arrival with a mentor in the community, and that mentor is the go-to person, the helper, concerning, for example, opening a bank account, or Asians who arrive from Korea who are millionaires over there, but here have absolutely no credit history, so they have to buy their BMW cash because they can't be financed. So there's a mentor there that's to help them, but it's a lot on the business side of things. So to put that in, yes, maybe if we push to this concept of the welcome wagon, where, okay, we welcome people, but we're also the contact person for socially, who's going to invite them to dinner, or if there's a party, we're going to invite them to join the party. Yeah, it's something that we've done with the Syrians. There were welcoming families in the sense that it was a type of mentoring for those families to give them some information. Yes, it's a very good idea. So you don't have anything in place yet, no, but it's a very good idea. And if nobody in Moncton who is setting up this type of thing, it's something that we should work on, because it's an important aspect. So the communities where there's very little retention are the communities that haven't succeeded in welcoming properly these new people. So if we kind of put the emphasis on this, it might work. My last point is concerning, and you're right to mention it, it's the public transport and the housing. It's a challenge for people just driving. I don't know to what extent the city of Dieppe has increased in an accelerated way its public transit network. It takes things, it takes money, and I understand that somebody who's just arriving has problems in, for example, getting a car immediately. He's going to need public transit. So maybe this aspect also, maybe in this aspect, there might be some volunteers who will help people integrating the region. If it's a question, for example, of finding an apartment, I think most of the apartments are serviced pretty well with by the bus. But if you're in houses, it's a little difficult to have the public transit. We took the time to go deeper on this because people were saying there's a lack of social housing in Dieppe. So we realize it, but there's no solution that's going to happen before Christmas. We wanted to make sure that they felt that they had been heard, and at the same time, we were very careful to not overpromise, because these are important challenges. But at the same time, they understood that, and they said, okay, maybe a question of being better informed on what's available before we get here. If there's available housing that's good for us, that's available in January, even if we arrive in May, maybe we could rent it right then and there so that we don't lose it. Things that are maybe more real. That's one aspect. And then also they were talking about openness, and they were saying, well, we're ready to commute with other people or to go into other cars with other people. If we knew people who had cars like that and who were available, then we would do. There are solutions available that will take time, and mind you, there are also maybe more short-term solutions that are more realistic that we could implement short-term, and which could help also in social integration. To talk about the co-driving.
Thank you, Ben, for your presentation. It's complete, exhaustive presentation. I think it's a great tool for Quebec, for Dieppe, sorry. Something you mentioned today, many valid things, many things that we had talked about before, public transit, housing. Yes, we took it, told it to the Minister Horsman, the guy representing the province, said that there was a lack of social housing in our region. So yes, it validates many things we've said, but as a council, so the many innovative things today, we can see that the Dieppe marker is an economic incubator. We can take advantage of this. So CCNB residents, that's great. That's something we could work on. What would be the next step? You know, it's an important tool. I think we need to take the time to talk more about it in camera. There are so many positive things here that could affect our region in the long term. So this could affect us, as Mr. Champeau has said. There's a lot of jewels in the, if you like, in the Dieppe market, the arts center that's not fully used, the CCNB that's opening their eyes. We've looked at many plans in public transit, employment. We're working on this. We've started many things already. So Ben is contributing another tool, and I hope that we'll take the time to do it right. Thank you. So I'll answer that one first. Obviously, this is a first step. We've said last year that we had somebody in position, but because of illness, we don't have that person. So this is the first step. And as you said, it validates many things that we knew, but at the same time, when you look at all the material, there's all a action plan in there. So now it'll be up to the staff with our support, municipal council, to help the staff to set up to implement this action plan. It'll be up to the council to decide as well, with the recommendation of the staff, how we're going to move this issue further ahead. If I listen Ben's report, I already have 12 ideas written down. So you know, it's not only myself, it's the whole council. We all recognize the priority that we have to give it. So now we have to use the resources we have, how many other resources we can give ourselves to prioritize some of the issues and some of the things that will bring in the most benefit. in terms of, let's say, integrating new people. At Town Hall, I've never refused to receive anybody. When I travel to the community, I meet, like in February is the Black History Month. I've met very people at different activities, events, at different events. Depending how you see it, yeah, it's not demonstration as in a manifestation, but people that have come to us, they've asked to come and meet me at the town hall. We've discussed several topics. You can see the list of people, whether it's Mali, Ivory Coast, Congo, Brazzaville, Kinshasa. There's a lot of people. So the idea is how bring all of this together. And it's already a priority of the Municipal Council. That'll be the next step after Mr. Chapeau's report. There's an action plan that's been recommended. We'll leave the staff to figure this out, to put down priorities, and then we'll implement that action plan. I'm convinced that based on what I hear myself in the community, this has been repeated again this evening, that we can really have a positive impact. Just in the last week or 10 days, we've discovered, perhaps not so much for refugees, but in the case of investors and immigrating investors. So for refugees, we don't even have in our area an association that's authorized, and Luc can correct me if I don't use the right words, but we don't have an association that's authorized to support the applications from people from outside, refugees to come here. We have families here that have brothers, sisters, whole families that would like to support them. They're ready to support them financially to bring them here, but we have no association in our area. Bathurst, Edmundston, and St. John. Only actually, Edmundston, St. John, actually, the only two places have this. So as an area, we have to put our money in our mouth is, where our mouth is, forgive the English expression. We have to move. If we want to be serious, we really want to attract not only economic immigrants, but also refugees. We have to give ourselves the tools. So I know Luc is seeing what can be, what's needed to be done to bring us further along on this. It's complex. It's going to require a full-time person to figure this all out, how we set up this position, proceed with recruitment. We'll leave all of this to the administrative staff to do this. And so if my comments did not bring out new comments, well, if I may, to complete 2 points. One is to an extent where everybody we've met have appreciated the initiative, the Dieppe's leadership initiative, to take the time to go and listen to them, to give them a platform to be heard. And secondly, we realize that this is a start and that if ever we can be useful in any way possible to maintain the discussion with the Dieppe Municipal Council staff, we have ideas that are realistic, that reflect the needs and the challenges we face every day. So I want to leave that with, as a conclusion, the door is open by all these stakeholders to continue the dialogue. There's a lot of resources, ideas there that have not been tapunched that could be beneficial for the rest. So if there's no other questions, thank you and good evening. So the next presentation, I think we're at the presentation on the insurance claims. And that's with the fire department. Does it cost for a year pass on the bus? $45 a month. If that's an example. So for us, it's an annual pass. Bus pass is not much. Yeah, there's the issue of the efficiency of the network, other related issues. To use our resources at the reception up front to become an information center. So we understand that there are periods of the year when payments for water, sewage, taxes, but there's never like 200 people waiting to speak with a receptionist. So the Culture and Arts Center, there are many possible ways. So, okay, now we change topics. So, Chief Landry, good evening. Good evening to you all. So you're not going to leave now. I hear the siren. So this evening we have a presentation. We want people to look at the potential revenue to help the functioning of the fire department. A company will present this evening, Fire Marquee, from Ontario. And so what they do with insurance policies, they have, if there's a fire and so on, they can go and get money. They would invoice the insurance. So it's not an invoice to citizens, it's for the insurance. Because if the clause is not there, they don't invoice. So Mr. Chris Carrier is going to give his presentation in English, but if you have questions in English, maybe we'll practice. He's originally from New-Brunswick, so I'll leave you with that, and if there are questions, we can talk about it after.
Yeah. Members of council, it's a pleasure to be here today. Firemark began its operations in 3 provinces in Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. We have over 100 clients, and we are hoping to expand into New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and British Columbia this year. Our largest client is the city of Kitchener with a population of 264,000, and our smallest client is in Ontario as well, the village of Newberry with a population of 494, and they have a council of 5. So 1% of their population are elected officials, and those must be fun family barbecues. Canada has approximately 207 insurance companies operating within our borders. The largest are the top 20 are listed there before you. Personally, my home in Collingwood is insured with Aviva, but Intact is the largest. You may see your insurer on that list. So the top 20 companies represent 84% of the marketplace. There's about 187 companies that share 16% of the marketplace. A number of those are the small farm mutuals, the Ontario mutuals. There's about 55 or 57 Ontario mutuals operating in Ontario. But they are good community members, but they are teeny tiny market share companies. Almost all property insurance policies in Canada, whether we're talking farm, residential, industrial, commercial, or public institutions, under the additional coverages section has a line item for fire department service charges. This is an example of a contract. It's a small commercial policy where the fire department coverages contained in that policy are up to $25,000. So if the fire department responded to an insured peril, like a fire, at this property, they could recover up to $25,000 worth of their expenses. This is another example of a policy for either the small mutuals or the farm market. The farm market is the most dynamic marketplace right now. We're seeing significant change. The coverages are actually being increased, but the biggest market player, Intact Insurance, is actually going after the farm mutual business in Ontario. So it'd be interesting to see how that rolls out over the next 2 to 3 years, but Intact Insurance has increased the farm coverage from $1,000 that we see typically to $25,000 worth of fire department charges. This is our legal definition of indemnification technology. As elected officials, I just want to emphasize to you that we're invoicing the insurance company. So our team of adjusters will work with the adjuster. I'm going to use cooperators as the example, cooperators insurance, as going through tonight's presentation. So we would deal with the adjuster with the property related to for cooperators that the incident occurred, and so we would communicate with them. So we are invoicing insurance companies. I'm not sending an invoice to the policy holder and saying, I want you to pay this, and then go to your insurance company and get reimbursed. In 7 years of doing the invoicing, nobody has paid out of pocket. It's always come from the insurance company. Essentially, what's critical component for you to do is to amend your services and fees bylaw. We call them user charges in Ontario. So to amend your fee bylaw to include language, I've provided some information for your fire chief, some examples across the country of what those bylaws would look like. But essentially your emergency services section, the fire department response fees, and then some wording to cover the costs of the vehicles, the people, any type of consumable as part of the defined loss in responding to that incident. The enabling legislation that you pass is required because the insurance contract has language in it that says we will pay you, but only if we're required to pay you or we're legally responsible to pay you. So as a level of government, you are privileged to make laws, bylaws, pass legislation, and that is the key to unlocking that insurance contract or creating the legal obligation for you to be reimbursed. Process, I'm a former mayor and councillor in a community in Ontario, Collingwood, Ontario, population of about 28,000. So I'm familiar more with the municipal process as opposed to the insurance side of the business. I have certainly learned a lot over the last 7 years. But when I came on with the company, they wanted me to look at the process and ensure that we minimize the work for staff. So when you sign on, we will meet with your staff. If you sign on, I don't want to be presumptuous. We will then review the work that we need from them, but essentially we're asking for is work that you're already doing. So a copy of the standard incident report with the crisis software that you use. We have a database of over 1,600 policy wordings. We'll pull up the data and information on that policy. Then we will make contact with the regional adjuster. Once again, if it's cooperators, for cooperators, we'll notify them that we're going to provide the proof of loss and itemized costing, and we would send that information to them. The recovery time is about 12 to 14 weeks. The shortest recovery file has been, well, it was 8 days, but there was a weekend over that. And the longest one has been just over 32 months.
And that 8-day one was in Collingwood, I suppose.
It was not. It was not, Mayor Lapierre. It was. It wasn't Blind River. It was up by Kapuskasing. It was near Kapuskasing. Moonbeam, Ontario. Moonbeam. The money that comes in from the insurance company is in the form of a check, obviously, in trust. It comes into our account. we give you 70% of the gross funds recovered, and we retain 30% for ourselves. If we work on a file and we close the file and there's no cost recovery, the cost to you is zero. It is only on files that we recover that we will retain 30%. I took a look at your operating budget. I still enjoy going to council meetings. I still enjoy listening to the work that you do, the very responsible work. I looked through your gross operating budget. Nothing jumped out at me. I wish we had that kind of budget when I was in Collingwood for the fire service. Ours was a little bit less. But what I wanted to do was a cost recovery projection, not based on population, but your actual call-outs. These amounts are your share. So this is the 70% of your share. So for 2015, I looked at the call-outs that you do and the property-related call-outs in particular. And so from a low range of 28,500 to a high range of 42,000. And then the same for 2016, it was just a little bit different, 26 to 38. And then for 2017, a low of 28.5 to a high of 42. Now, knock wood, that's barring any unforeseen major incidents, because those skew the numbers. The money stays, within the fire department budget. The insurance recovery says fire department expenses. It can be used in public education, personnel training, and capital purchases. Your new legislation is actually quite nice, by the way, your provincial act. I've read it. I spoke with the clerk treasurer in St. John, and she confirmed with the clerk of the legislature that your new Bill 44 is in place. And so now you have an act that acknowledges natural persons powers, which gives you broad latitude in the interpretation of your actions. We've had that for a while in Ontario.
Long time coming for us.
Yes, very much so, very much so. I agree with you. We could have a conversation just about that anytime. So you have broad interpretations of the powers that you now wield. The test that you do to that is it reasonable? Is it reasonable for you to pass legislation to unlock an insurance contract that essentially says you have to pass legislation? You're not a signator to that contract, but you do have first-party coverage within that contract. You're an identified first-party coverage. So we are providing proof of loss and a summary of the costs on your behalf, but is it reasonable for you to take legislation to access those funds? The policyholder is not entitled to those funds. Only you are, your municipal fire department. Only you are. So if your fire department doesn't get it, the insurance industry keeps it. Oh, my rates are going to go up. Everybody asked me that in Ontario. The rates are not going to go up. The system is designed much like your municipal budgeting system, that you put forward what you estimate your costs are going to be so that you can figure out your tax rate. You do take a look at the end of the year, your actuals versus your projected amounts. So let's just say this building here costs you $10,000 a year for heat and hydro. If your taxpayers found out you were paying zero, but still charging them $10,000 a year, they might be upset. Where you would get concerned is when you're paying $12,000 and you've budgeted $10,000. Currently, or prior to 2010, the industry wasn't paying out anything, but still recovering funds on the revenue side. Lloyd's of London, which Lloyd's of Canada, is the number 7, I think, insurer in the country. Last year, they put out a statement in the industry magazine that the market here is still soft, strong pressure to keep rates low. What drives rate increases on automotive is very different than with property. property, it's the construction price index. The cost to rebuild a home or a property is more expensive today than it was 2 weeks ago, than it was 2 years ago, and so on. The town of Huntsville Councillor Tim Withy, he's no longer on council, this was a few years ago, but he's an insurance broker at the time with BrokerLink, and he made a comment to his colleagues that the industry forecasts that there's going to be so many incidents per year, and that they've already put this into the premium rate. And I agree with him. Risk on property is measured very differently than automotive. So I drive a lot. I drive about 40,000 kilometers a year, and the value of my car is important in establishing the premium, but I'm the risk. Me, my driving record. My son is 19. I can't afford my auto insurance for him. He's way too risky at the age of 19. But if he owned my house, he would pay the same rate that I do, because it's measured differently. Brick construction, wood construction. Is there a municipal water source nearby? Is the fire service full-time, part-time, or a composite department? Those things come into the calculation equation. There is no deductible applied to this section of the policy. We have a client, North Battleford, Saskatchewan, who had a fire in their library. We contacted them and said, have you signed off on the claim yet? The answer was no. They asked us why, and we said, because you're insured, the municipality is insured with JLT, Jardine Lloyd Thompson, and they had $100,000 worth of fire department expense coverage within their own municipal policy, and they recovered all the funds from that fire call from their own policy. No deductible. We get asked this question, I pay taxes, isn't that what I pay taxes for? Yes, we do pay taxes, but we also try as municipal leaders to balance the amount of money we receive from taxpayers versus development charges, other revenues, and cost recovery. And this is a cost recovery. The service will always be provided. It's not a fee for service. Sometimes you come in and it costs you 25 cents for every page of paper you get copied. This, you still call, the service will come. It is a cost recovery that the property owner has paid for within their policy, and it's to access those funds. When I showed you your budget was $7.4 million. On a really good year, we're thinking $48,000 worth of cost recovery for you. So the taxpayers are still going to pick up most of the call, but we're going to do a little bit of sharing now. Hey, thanks for telling us how to do it. What do we need you for? You might be surprised. It's not as simple as sending an invoice to the insurance company and they cut you a check. There is a lot of stuff that they want done. When we started Firemark in 2010, we anticipated 5 or 6 processes. Now we have a multitude of processes just for cooperators, and there's 207 companies out there. So depending on which region of Ontario I'm working in with cooperators, the regional adjuster wants it done one way. And then in another part of Ontario, they want the filing done another way. We've modified our systems to accommodate the insurers so that we're complying with their requests to make it easier for you to recover your money. This is a large example of a recovery. There was a tornado in Angus, Ontario, near Base Borden in June 2014. It's about 30 minutes away from where I live. There were 103 properties that were hit and impacted adversely by that tornado. There was 41 different insurance companies. We sometimes think there might be 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 insurance companies, but there was 41 insurance companies involved in those 103 properties. If one insurance company happened to own or sell policies to all those 103, I'm sure the broker would have been let go. It's too much of a risk exposure. We received the files 11 months after the incident. The municipality, as you can imagine, as municipal leaders, you had more important things on your mind. Your citizens who've been impacted by a natural disaster. So they dealt with those things first. We have 2 years to recover on the files. So we received the information that we required from the fire service 11 months after the incident, and it took us 10 months to recover. And not only did we recover the funds for the responding fire service, but the 4 neighbors who came in to assist them, we recovered their expenses as well. The mayor of Esta Township is the deputy warden of the county of Simcoe. He's also a director of FCM. So if you go to an FCM event and you see Mayor Terry Dowdle from Ontario, please ask him about our program. He has written a letter of endorsement. He's quite keen on it. And there's some of the fire chiefs. It's always fun to drop a check off. When you make appointments to sell the program, you have to make the appointment. You never have to make an appointment when you're just dropping a check off. That's always the fun part. Be happy to address any concerns that you or your colleagues have.
Questions, commentaires? Questions, commentaires, inquiétudes?
Questions, comments, concerns?
Well, the preliminary work, you looked at our books and inspected our situation, and you said, I heard $48,000 would have been an example of
A
based
range?
on
28 to 48.
right.
Yes.
Monsieur Godet, Councillor Godet.
It's a question of information. Have we ever charged our residents for services? Has it ever been a question of doing so?
Nope.
Because if I understand right, all insurance policies on houses have a payment out available for.
This is all
Or
through
services?
insurance. This is all through their insurance policies.
So in the interest of full disclosure, almost all policies have it. I've seen one policy in 7 years that did not have it. It was actually my father-in-law's property. It was a summer cottage that was only accessible in the summertime, and it was not winterized, and it was closed up in a very remote area on a small inland lake, so the fire department couldn't get there even if there was a fire. So there was not the fire department coverage, though there was the property coverage. So, and we are not invoicing the policy holder, we're invoicing the insurance company. So I would hate for you to think that we're charging your residents a fee. We are not. You're enabling legislation to access the coverage that they've already paid for in their policy to recover some of the expenses for your fire service.
Okay. And in the event that the policy would not have that clause, would it be your intent that the city start charging the resident for such things?
No. No. As a former elected official for 13 years, no, absolutely not. I would leave the company before I would ever propose that.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Anyone else? Personne d'autre?
No one else? If not, Chef Landry, just a little detail. If there's no cover, there's no invoice. If it's for $5,000 and the invoice is $10,000, they'll just pay $5,000. The rest of the invoice is canceled. It's just what they're covered for. Somebody who had a fire, what's the insurance policy? We do this naturally. We ask what kind of insurance company they have, and we send it's up to them to do the research if there's a cover or not. So we just ask for the insurance company name. We send it to Firemark, and they take care of that. Thank you. Last point is that St. John and Fredericton maybe are a little ahead of us. They're looking at the same program. They've received the presentation, so they're looking into. So we need a bylaw for that. So they're looking at a bylaw that's what I wanted to explain. We are not going ahead with it. There has to be a bylaw. So there'll be 4 readings before that, and the impact has to be considered. Monsieur Brideau, so right now you do not invoice at all the insurance company in case of a fire. There are no invoices for fire in Dieppe. It's just taxes. So as it was explained by Mr. Carrier, it's the insurance policy. When it's not claimed, the insurance companies keep that money, so they benefit from it. So in municipalities, it accumulates. So if there are no other questions,
Pleasure meeting you. I always like somebody to come to council and bring us the potential increased revenues.
Thank you very much, and we will be at FCM in Halifax in June. If any of you
So
are
we'll see you
planning on
there.
attending, we hope to have a chat with you as well.
All right. Thank you now. Bye-bye. Alors, s'il n'y a pas rien...
so now if there's nothing else, that concludes our evening of presentations. No, sorry, I always forget my friend Councillor Godet, discussion on the Public Transit Governance Committee. Well, I'm starting to be accustomed to it. Yeah, and I'm accustomed to saying I'm sorry. There was a meeting of the Governance Committee last week. We talked about different things. The budget, we looked at it for 2017, and in fact, it was a very good year. In regards to operations, our revenues have increased in Dieppe somewhat, a little less in Riverview, but still, the year was a good one. And with the new buses, we expect that the operational costs will go down, especially on maintenance. We've also looked at the question of distribution of revenue between the 3 municipalities. The distribution in the past was done by evaluation of the tickets. Somebody collected all the tickets, all the passes, and manually was looking to find which municipalities had that. It was very, very, very arduous work. So archaic also. And for a period of 1 or 2 years, we decided to take the revenue of the last 3 years and to establish an equivalency, and the municipalities will receive those revenues next year. There won't be any more counting of tickets and passes. Concerning promotion, this year again, I think it's in June, we were talking about taking the bus free. So it's something that we've been doing for a couple of years, and we're going to be continuing to do that. In terms of funding for the infrastructure in public transit, as you know, the federal is setting up a fairly rich program specifically for the Moncton region for the next 10 years. There's a potential of $156 million that would be available for public transport. So for the next 10 years, approximately 51 would be from the federal, 31 from provincial, and the rest would be from the municipalities. So it's a program that we expect will help us increase our capacity in public transport. The last point that was raised at that meeting was concerning the community program of passes. Some people are in very dire situations. Kodiak gives free passes to help those families or those individuals to get around the municipality. Prior to that, it was managed by Kodiak Transpo, but this year, United Way took charge of this program, and they will be responsible to hand those passes out in the community through their agencies. So those are the items that were brought forth at the meeting, and we're continuing also to move forward with the evaluation of the needs concerning the new routes that we'd like to set up. That's it. Thank you. Are there any questions from members of council on public transit? If not, lights turning on. So wish you a good evening, and we'll see you next week for the municipal council meeting. Thank you. Good evening.